So now, when you were when they were separating themselves, did you find it was accurate? Like, is it,
Not the first one, but with this survey, it was way better because it was more detailed. The first survey I used was one page. It only had 3 questions,
Yeah.
so that's where, the one child who was the weakest. I've got it all.
do you think if you compared, like, I mean, I know you can have multiple things. Both of them would be strengths, but would it work if you compared, do I enjoy telling stories more than I do math? Like, if you could choose, but then you might lose out on something too.
Where did this come from? I was down. Well, I don't know. Because you just started, so I'm going to need to learn Chinese. Like they choose.
We didn't notice the camera at all. At break.
Yeah, because I have Congress right on my board.
I looked into
That was how I got to that.
so then so did you just give them introduce so I think what I have to do is go down to the demos and show the students all of the steps and practice before it's actually part of our classroom. And I keep all of their books, so they never have their journals in the desks. I just find management-wise, if I keep everything, hand them out when I need them. But as I'm going through this, I'm thinking I need to keep some kind of folder in the desk where they have options
But I'm not to the point like
choices, so they'll have maybe a Mad Minute sheet where they can pull it out and practice some of their
randomly picked.
math 3 add-ins. Having an extra journal in there, so if they want to read something, they can instead of stories.
Do this where it showed whether they ever heard of symmetry or not.
Right.
And we did an exit ticket once after a social lesson. And they really liked that, actually. Even grade 3s, they really liked that. Just someone wrote down. And it was a good way of seeing if they got anything out of the lesson. Right. Yeah. So we could try to support some of the things plus the survey. It was fun, actually. I quite enjoyed it.
And there's challenging activities in there. There's some simpler and some harder. So it's kind of like all of them kind of
They didn't have to do all of them to have the book.
No.
It'd be kind of like that Christmas card and clothes activities and some word searches. There were some that were way harder than others.
Yeah, there's
some were just
definitely
coloring
some.
pages.
Yeah, some were. Well, I didn't have to color them, but I had. Some were definitely more challenging than others, and some chose to do those, and some chose to finish the whole book. I'm sure a lot of them all independently. Mostly independently. Like sometimes I would assist them to get them going, or to show them how to do the pictures. His words and pictures. Yeah, just directions. Just tell them the directions mostly, and sometimes they need help as they're
So is that what you did your research on?
yeah. Well, what I've done is develop booklets, and so it could, I mean, people could have a learning center where they go pull things from that center, whereas I have different booklets that they pull out and they work on, and there's all different levels.
At their desk?
Yes, at their desk.
Did different kids get different booklets?
No, but in that booklet, there's different levels of things that they do.
And they can choose.
Yeah, they can choose what they want to do.
where everybody goes to an anchor activity?
Just once a week.
Once a week, okay, so, and so are you using that to train in your routine then of how to choose an anchor activity, or what are you using?
Yeah, basically.
And that has to, they have to be trained, they have to do these things first anyways, before they can do them as an extra.
That's a good idea.
Train them as a group, and then I had from there, but the child nursing events, they all get a chance to have feel something.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be like center time.
Yeah, it would be.
Everybody gets to choose.
Yeah.
I had to have that something was this big, and they thought they had to poke it up and straight. No.
It becomes a management issue.
I know, but it really was a good activity. I couldn't believe it. Something so simple. You just ground them. I'm like, I can't wait to get in it because they can't write on my whiteboard with my markers. Any other time. It's a bit daily. I like it. It's a good activity.
So can they come in before the first bell to sign in, or is that once the first bell rings, they come in?
What our kids do is they have to wait in the front room until a certain time. And we have a town bus that runs here, and then all the kids are
So they sort of,
Each of these bullets, and if the bullet applied to them under the verbal or word smart, they colored in a square. And we had predetermined the colors of, word smart would be purple. So then with this student, he's a self-smart and a picture smart person. All of those body smart, not, math isn't his thing. So it just kind of gives them a look, and then we're going to put them up around the room, and they can, if they have to find partners, find somebody who's self-smart like you for this activity. So it was kind of interesting for them to
You have to do math, find a math part when you're not too smart. Whoops.
Sometimes you do want to pair up a strong and a weak,
Yeah.
or, but yeah, so it was kind of interesting, even just the whole idea of putting them in a chart.
Students enjoyed filling out the questionnaires or doing the surveys. But I found in my classroom, sometimes they filled in the survey according to what was most fun to do, not necessarily their best learning style.
there's a choice I was mentioning, I did it on the smart board, and I found that the kids chose whatever heading was more popular. Like if 5 or 6 kids were before and they said they like to work by themselves, all of them said they like to work by themselves. But then when I did it individually on paper where they couldn't see each other's responses, it was totally different. So I don't know for that age level.
So there's an element of the students having to come to an understanding of themselves that some aren't there.
Well, it's hard enough for adults to come to that understanding, so to expect a 10-year-old to really have a good grasp of that is kind of asking a lot. But maybe by doing lots of these, they can, if you did one numerous times during the year, maybe they would become more aware.
Yeah, and if we can tie it to the purpose of why we want to know that, because we want to instruct in a way that you can learn. If they start eventually to understand that language. It's interesting as I hear you talk, because the lower grades, the kids all say, yeah, I can do it all, right? And then you're saying that they just don't engage really. I mean, they just there's no authenticity to it, I guess.
Yeah, because most of mine were auditory.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call them that.
Yeah. But Kim said that she did it with their grades, with grade 7.
Yeah, and they loved it. They were excited to see, when we were done it all, it's like they compared, okay, so I'm verbal linguistic and you're math, or when it came to the Myers-Briggs, we did that with them, and everyone's going like, what are you, and so they were so excited to see how they were the same as their friends and how they were different. And it's going to be neat because we're going to create just a big class poster now and see who all is auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and so they'll be able to see and use that as part of the groupings. And then on the other end, in my grade 1s, I have no clue how I'm going to, because not only do I have grade 1s, I also have the students who are usually struggling, just the dynamic of the group that I have. So they've already been grouped according to ability, so that's one thing, but they are still, I think they're still figuring themselves out how they learn. So how do I use learner profiles, which I think are very valid? How do I get that information? I mean, you suggest, through observing and doing the different types of learning or different teaching styles and see how they respond to it. But I think at that young age, a lot of it is just observation and figuring it out in trial and error. Unfortunately, they're very forgiving. And as you said, very malleable too, so they themselves will adapt at times to how we teach and try and get the most out of it they can too. Not all the time.
It's interesting to see then, then as part of our understanding as we continue on this journey of learner profile, trying to figure out the developmental stages that go along with that and finding the appropriate method that works for the different developmental ages.